I don't know what hit me first. The smell of the perfume on her pillow when I woke up that morning, or the feeling that something was just off. The kind of feeling you get when you know, deep down, that the rug is about to be pulled out from under you. I should have known. Hell, I had been living in the fog of ignorance, letting things slide like some kind of passive idiot, waiting for a hint to fall into my lap. And that's exactly what happened, isn't it? The day started like any other. I kissed her goodbye, Sarah, my wife of 5 years, before I left for work. She gave me a quick peck, her lips almost too tight, like she was trying to distance herself. I didn't think much of it at the time. She was always busy, always stressed, but she told me she loved me. I should have asked more questions. I should have pressed harder. At work, things were moving fast, deadline after deadline. I didn't have the energy to think about anything else. But then I got the call. An old friend of mine, John, was in town, and he needed to meet. "It's important," he said. So, I agreed, setting up a quick lunch. John wasn't the kind of guy who got sentimental. We hadn't caught up in a while, so I thought maybe he just missed hanging out. But when he slid into the booth across from me, he seemed tense, almost nervous. I raised an eyebrow. "What's up, man?" He hesitated, then looked around like he was making sure no one was listening. "It's Sarah," he said, dropping the bomb in one swift motion. "I don't know how to tell you this, but she's been seeing someone else." The words hung in the air for a moment, like a dark cloud. "What are you talking about?" I couldn't believe it. "She's my wife, John. You're telling me this?" His eyes were serious, his jaw tight. "I saw her, man, at the hotel downtown. She was with some guy, kissing him. It's not the first time either." I sat there, numb. I felt like the ground had just opened beneath me. How could Sarah, the woman I trusted more than anyone, betray me like that? I wanted to scream, punch the table, demand answers. But all I could do was sit there, frozen. John was no help either. He just looked at me like he expected me to blow up, but I couldn't. At least not yet. I had to see for myself. I excused myself from the meeting, my mind racing. The entire drive back home, all I could think about was how I didn't want to believe it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe John had it wrong. But something in my gut told me it wasn't. Maybe I'd been blind for too long, but I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my chest anymore. When I got home, Sarah's car was parked in the driveway. It looked like she was just getting back from somewhere. My heart pounded as I walked toward the house. I stepped inside and saw her in the living room, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She barely acknowledged my presence. "Hey, babe," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, steady. But I wasn't calm. Not at all. She glanced up for a second and gave me that fake smile she always put on when she didn't want to deal with me. "Hey," she said, distracted. "Where have you been?" I asked, my voice just a little too sharp. "I was trying to call you." Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, before she replied, "Oh, just out. You know, errands." But I could see the lie in her eyes. I could smell it. The way she avoided my gaze and seemed to close off her body language. It was all too obvious. But I didn't press her yet. I needed more. I needed proof. I went to the garage to grab something from my car, but when I opened the door to the back seat, there it was. A small bag, a makeup bag. I don't know why, but I felt this urgency to open it, and when I did, my heart nearly stopped. Inside, tucked away like she was trying to hide it, was a receipt from a hotel. A hotel I knew well. The same one John had mentioned. The same hotel where he had seen her with another man. I couldn't breathe for a second. My stomach churned. I stood frozen in the garage, holding the evidence in my hands like it was going to shatter if I moved too quickly. I didn't know whether to feel rage, betrayal, or confusion. But I knew one thing for sure. I was about to confront the woman who had lied to my face for who knows how long. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to gather my thoughts. This was it. The moment of truth. I couldn't pretend anymore. Not when I had this. And I was going to make her answer for it. I couldn't stand there any longer. My hands were shaking, the receipt crumpled tightly in my grip, and my mind was racing at 100 miles an hour. I shoved it into my pocket and walked back into the house, determined to face Sarah, to get some answers. I needed to hear it from her. her side of the story, even if I already knew it was a lie. She was still sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. I stood in the doorway, staring at her, the weight of what I was holding suffocating me. I couldn't stay quiet. I couldn't let her act like nothing had happened, not after what I had found. "Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." She glanced up at me with that same dismissive look, that "I don't really care" expression that had been creeping in more and more over the past few months. She didn't even bother to put the phone down. "What's up?" she asked, clearly uninterested, almost like she already knew what was coming. I took a deep breath. "I know what's been going on. I know about the hotel. I know you've been seeing someone else." She froze for a split second, her eyes flickering just the slightest bit. But that was enough to confirm it for me. She knew I had the proof now. She couldn't lie her way out of this one. She slowly set the phone down, then looked me dead in the eyes, as if she was trying to gauge how much I actually knew. I could see the calculation in her eyes, the realization that she had been caught, and the decision on how to play it. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice smooth, too smooth. "You've lost your mind. That's just some old receipt. You're overreacting." I couldn't believe the audacity. She was still lying, denying it right to my face. My fists clenched, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had to hear it from her. I needed her to admit it. "Don't lie to me, Sarah," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a knife. "I found the receipt in your car." "The hotel, Sarah? The one you've been going to with him? The one I was told about? You can't keep lying to me." "Not anymore." Her face twisted for a moment, and I saw the briefest flicker of guilt before she regained control. But then she did something I wasn't expecting. She smiled. "Wow, you really think you've got me cornered, don't you?" she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Let me guess, you're going to throw a tantrum and tell me how much I've hurt you? How you can't believe I've done this to you?" I stared at her in disbelief. This was the woman I had spent years of my life with, the one I had trusted more than anyone. And here she was, acting like I was the one in the wrong. It was like she had no concept of the pain she had caused, no remorse, just an endless supply of excuses and arrogance. "Is that really all you have to say?" I asked, my voice quiet but steady. "You've been lying to me for months. You've been sneaking around behind my back, and now you're acting like I'm the problem?" She laughed, a cold, mocking laugh that made my blood boil. "Oh, please, give me a break," she said, her eyes narrowing. "You don't get to act like you're the saint here. You've been so busy with your work, so wrapped up in your own little world, that I had to get my needs met somewhere else. And honestly, I don't even feel bad about it. Not anymore." My heart stopped. She didn't even feel bad? She was admitting it so nonchalantly, like it didn't matter at all, like all the years we'd spent together meant nothing to her. I took a step back, trying to process her words, but it felt like I had been sucker punched. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice low. "Is it that guy you've been texting all the time? The one who always shows up late when you're working late?" She gave me a dismissive wave. "It doesn't matter. What's the point of dragging his name into this? He makes me feel good. Something you stopped doing a long time ago." Her words hit me like a slap to the face. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the anger burning through me, but I had to stay calm. I had to get through this conversation without losing my cool, even though everything in me was screaming to yell, to make her feel the weight of what she had done. "You're really going to sit there and tell me this was my fault?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and disbelief. "You're going to blame me for what you've done?" She leaned back on the couch, crossing her arms in that familiar, indifferent way. "Yes, I am," she said, her eyes cold. "You were always too busy. You never paid attention to me. I don't owe you any explanations. You want the truth? Fine. I'm done with you. This marriage is over." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Done with me? Over? This wasn't some petty argument. She was ending everything with a shrug. I stood there, unable to speak, my mind racing, my body trembling with a mix of shock and outrage. How could she just throw it all away like that? How could she be so heartless? "You're really going to walk away from everything we had?" I asked, struggling to hold back the tears. "Yep," she replied with a cold, emotionless smile. I think it's time we both move on. And just like that, the woman I thought I knew was gone. I was standing in front of a stranger, someone who had no qualms about throwing away years of marriage like it was nothing. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I stood there, frozen in place, as Sarah's words echoed through my mind like a brutal, relentless drumbeat. I'm done with you. It was as though she had shattered everything. Everything I thought I knew about her, about us. The last 5 years were nothing but a cruel joke, a lie I had been too blind to see. And worse, she didn't even care. There wasn't a single ounce of remorse in her eyes, no sign of regret. The woman I had loved, truly loved, had turned into someone I didn't even recognize. It felt like a dream, a nightmare, but it wasn't. It was real. I didn't know how long I stood there, just staring at her, before I finally found the strength to speak. But when I opened my mouth, the words came out wrong, broken, jagged, and unrecognizable. You've really destroyed me, Sarah, I said, the words tasting like ash. You don't even care, do you? You just threw everything away without a second thought. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she shifted uncomfortably on the couch, a flash of guilt crossing her face. But it was only for a moment. She quickly wiped it away, masking it with that same cold indifference. I care enough to be honest with you, she replied, her voice flat. Isn't that what you wanted? The truth? I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout at her, to make her feel the weight of her betrayal. But all I could do was stand there, my fists clenched, my heart pounding in my chest like it was trying to escape my body. The anger, the sadness, the betrayal. It was all too much. I had never felt so powerless, so small in my entire life. Her betrayal wasn't just about the man she had been with. It was about everything. The lies, the deceit, the little things that had added up over time. But I had been too naive to see. The late nights at work, the constant, I'm too tired, excuses, the growing distance between us. It was all leading up to this. It was all part of her plan. She had been checked out long before I had even realized. Do you even know what you've done to me? I asked, my voice trembling, barely above a whisper. Do you have any idea how much this hurts? How much it destroys me to know that you've been with someone else all this time? Her expression didn't change. She just shrugged, a small, almost mocking smile playing at the corners of her lips. It's not my fault you're so needy, she said. You always needed more from me than I could give. I can't be everything for you. That stung more than anything. It felt like a slap to the face, but it also felt like the last thread of hope I had been holding on to snapped in an instant. She wasn't just leaving me. She wasn't just having an affair. She was dehumanizing me, stripping away everything I had believed about our relationship, about the love we once shared. I had spent so many years trying to be the perfect husband, the perfect partner. I sacrificed my own needs, my own happiness, to make sure she felt loved, cared for, and important. And this was how she repaid me. This was how she saw me. Needy, pathetic, not worthy of her time or respect. Do you even care that I'm hurting? I asked, my voice breaking despite myself. You've completely shattered me, Sarah. She didn't even flinch. No, she said simply, without a trace of emotion. I don't care. You're just not the man I want anymore. You're not what I need. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. They crushed whatever was left of me, leaving me with nothing but emptiness and despair. The woman I had loved, trusted, had just torn apart everything we had built together. And now she was dismissing me like I was nothing. Is that it? I asked, barely able to hold back the tears. You just walk away from everything? You don't even want to try and fix this? She stood up then, looking at me as though she was done with the conversation, as though she had already moved on. I don't need to fix anything. I'm done here. I've already made up my mind. The finality in her tone was chilling. It was like she had completely erased me from her life, and there was no room for negotiation, no space for discussion. This wasn't just a fight. This was the end. I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt like I was suffocating, drowning in the weight of it all. The anger I had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a hollow sadness that left me feeling numb. I had been so sure of everything, so sure that our marriage meant something. But now, it was all just a lie. All the love, all the sacrifices, everything I had done for her. It meant nothing. She had thrown it all away without a second thought. "I guess this is it then," I said, my voice quiet and broken. "You're really done with me." She didn't answer. She just walked past me, heading for the door. As she passed, she paused for a second, glancing over her shoulder with that same cold, detached look. "Goodbye," she said flatly, and then she was gone. Just like that. My wife, the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, was gone. She had walked out on me without a care in the world, leaving me alone in the wreckage of what used to be my life. I stood there in the silence, the weight of her absence crashing down on me. I had no idea what to do next. What was I supposed to feel? What was I supposed to do with all this pain? I had never been more lost in my entire life. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't stay here. I couldn't stay in this house, surrounded by the memories of the lies, the betrayal. I had to get out. I needed to breathe. I needed to escape from the suffocating weight of everything that had just happened. But no matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, the truth would always follow me. I had been cheated on. I had been destroyed. And there was no going back. The silence in the house was deafening. Sarah was gone, but her presence lingered in every room, in every crevice, haunting me like a ghost. I didn't know where she had gone, or if she even cared to tell me. All I knew was that my world had been torn apart, and I was standing in the rubble, unsure of what to do next. The man I had once been, the man who had a wife, a future, a life, felt like a distant memory, like someone I used to know. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. The anger had been replaced by a cold, hollow emptiness. I couldn't even bring myself to cry. I felt like I had no tears left to shed. Instead, I was numb to everything, to the way she had destroyed me, to the lies she had told me for months, maybe even years, to the thought of how little I truly meant to her. I went through the motions, aimlessly wandering through the house. I grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the kitchen cabinet and poured myself a glass, though I wasn't sure what I was trying to accomplish with it. Maybe I was trying to drown the pain, or maybe I was trying to numb the reality that had become my life. Either way, I wasn't sure it was working. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where Sarah had been just hours ago. I replayed the conversation over and over in my mind, each word she said hitting me like a fresh wave of pain. "I don't care," she had said. "I'm done with you." It kept echoing in my mind, over and over, until I thought I might go insane. The betrayal stung, but it was the finality of it all that truly cut deep. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with everything, had walked out of my life without a second thought. There was no regret in her eyes, no remorse in her voice. She had moved on, and I was left standing here, trying to make sense of it all. But there was no sense to be made. It was as if my entire life had been one big lie. I wasn't sure how much time passed before I found myself staring at my phone. I had no real purpose for looking at it, no one to call, but there I was, my finger hovering over Sarah's contact. I had her number memorized, but I didn't know if I had the strength to call her, to hear her voice again, knowing how cold and indifferent it had been the last time we spoke. But something inside me snapped. I needed answers. I needed closure, even if it meant confronting the painful truth that she had already made up her mind. With shaking hands, I dialed her number. It rang for what felt like an eternity, and just when I thought she wouldn't answer, she picked up. "Hello?" Her voice sounded almost bored, as if I was just another nuisance interrupting her day. "Sarah," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "I need to know something. Was it him? Was it always him? Were you already done with me long before I found out?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her weighing her response, deciding how much to reveal. I had to resist the urge to scream at her. I needed to hear the truth, no matter how painful. "Why do you need to know?" she asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. "It's over. I'm done. Does it really matter who it was? You weren't giving me what I needed, and I found someone who did." Her words were like a slap to the face. I had always tried to be there for her, tried to be the best husband I could be. But she was right. There had been a distance between us, a gap that I hadn't been able to bridge. But I had never expected her to cheat. I had never expected her to betray me like this. You think this makes it easier? I asked, my voice shaking. You think that walking away, leaving me with nothing, is going to fix everything? She let out a sigh, almost as if she was bored with the conversation. I don't owe you any more explanations, okay? I'm done. I've moved on, and so should you. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. She was done. She had already moved on, and I was left here, clinging to the shattered pieces of a life that no longer existed. Is he better than me? I asked, unable to stop the question from slipping out. Does he make you happy? There was a brief silence, and for a moment, I thought she might actually show some emotion. But then she answered, and her words were as cold and detached as ever. He's just different, she said, her voice lacking any real warmth. You wouldn't understand. I wanted to argue, to tell her that I did understand, that I had tried to understand, but I knew it wouldn't matter. She had made her decision. She had chosen him over me, and now I was the one left to pick up the pieces. The conversation ended with a few empty words, nothing meaningful, nothing that could undo the damage she had caused. I hung up the phone and sat there in silence, staring at the screen as if it would somehow provide me with the answers I was searching for. But it didn't. There were no answers, only more questions, more uncertainty, and a growing sense of despair. I had always thought I knew Sarah, but now I was questioning everything. How had I been so blind? How had I missed all the signs? Maybe I hadn't been paying attention. Maybe I had been so focused on trying to be the perfect husband that I didn't see how unhappy she had become. But even that felt like an excuse. Even that didn't explain the betrayal, the lies. And now, I was left with a decision. What was I supposed to do now? What was the right thing to do? Could I ever trust again? Could I ever love again? I knew I couldn't stay in this house. Not with the memories of Sarah lingering in every room. Not with the betrayal hanging in the air like a suffocating fog. I had to leave. I had to get away from it all. But where would I go? What would I do? I stood up, the weight of it all pressing down on me, and walked toward the door. I didn't have answers. But maybe, just maybe, getting away from the pain would give me some clarity. One thing was certain. My life had changed forever. I left. I couldn't stand the idea of being in that house, surrounded by everything that reminded me of Sarah. The life we had built, the moments we shared, all of it now tainted by her betrayal. Every inch of that house felt like a prison, and I was suffocating in it. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where to go or what to do. But I had to escape. I had to breathe again. The night was cold, and the streets felt unfamiliar, like I was walking through a world that no longer made sense. My feet carried me aimlessly, like I was on autopilot, trying to outrun the suffocating pain that clung to me. The whiskey had worn off, leaving behind only a dull ache in my chest. I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah, the way she had looked at me when she walked out the door, like I was nothing. I found myself at a bar. It wasn't a place I usually went to, but it didn't matter. I needed something to fill the void, something to numb the emptiness that threatened to consume me. I walked in and took a seat at the bar, ordering a drink without much thought. The bartender didn't ask any questions, just poured the whiskey and slid it toward me. I didn't know why I chose whiskey again. Maybe I thought it would help me forget, even if just for a little while. But the truth was, no amount of alcohol could erase the pain, the betrayal. I stared into the glass, watching the amber liquid swirl, and tried to drown out the thoughts that kept swirling in my mind. The image of Sarah laughing at me, her cold indifference, it was like a loop that wouldn't stop playing. I had loved her. I had given her everything, and now she had thrown it all away without a second thought. I hadn't even been aware of the guy sitting next to me until he spoke. "Rough night, huh?" he said, his voice low but friendly. I glanced over at him, surprised by the sudden intrusion. "Yeah," I muttered, taking another sip of my drink. "You could say that." He studied me for a moment, probably sensing something more than just a casual bad night in my expression. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," he said, his voice surprisingly warm. "You want to talk about it?" I almost laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. I couldn't even explain what I was feeling. It was too complicated, too much, but something in the guy's tone made me hesitate. Maybe it was just the fact that someone, anyone, was acknowledging the pain I was in. That maybe I wasn't completely invisible. I took a deep breath. It's just, my life's falling apart, man, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. I caught my wife cheating on me, and I don't even know what to do anymore. I'm just lost. The guy nodded, his eyes showing understanding. I get it. That kind of betrayal can knock you on your ass. You're probably feeling every emotion under the sun right now. Anger, sadness, confusion, maybe even guilt. But you're not alone in this. It gets better. I stared at him, unsure if I believed him. How could it get better? How could anything ever feel right again after something like this? But his words lingered, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a future ahead of me. A future where I wasn't drowning in pain. A future where I could move past all of this. Do you think I'm crazy for still being hung up on her? I asked, my voice soft. For still wanting answers, even though she's already moved on? He shook his head. No, man, that's not crazy. It's human. You loved her. You trusted her. You don't just turn that off because she decided to throw it all away. But you gotta realize something, too. She's already made her choice. She's not your responsibility anymore. I sat there for a long time, just listening to the hum of the bar, feeling the weight of his words settle in. I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to accept that Sarah had already made her decision. But deep down, I knew he was right. She had made her choice, and I was left to deal with the wreckage. I drank in silence for a while, trying to find some semblance of peace in the chaos of my emotions. The guy next to me didn't push me to talk anymore, and I was thankful for that. Sometimes, the best thing someone can do is just sit in silence with you, without trying to fix things, without trying to offer empty words of comfort. As the hours passed, I felt the alcohol starting to dull the sharp edges of my thoughts. It didn't make everything okay, but it made it a little easier to breathe. For just a moment, I wasn't consumed by the agony of betrayal. For just a moment, I was free. When I finally stood up to leave, the guy at the bar gave me a nod. Take care of yourself, man, he said. You'll get through this. Thanks, I muttered, before stepping out into the cold night air. The city was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was alone in the world. No one to share my pain with, no one to understand. Just me and the empty streets. As I walked back to my car, I couldn't help but wonder what my life would look like now. What was I supposed to do with all the anger, the confusion, the sense of loss? How could I ever move on from this? From her? The drive back to the empty house was long, and when I finally parked in the driveway, I couldn't bring myself to go inside. It felt like a tomb, a place where all the memories of the life I thought I had lived were suffocating me. I didn't know what the next step was, or if there was even a next step at all. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living in the shadows of Sarah's betrayal. I had to find a way to heal, to rebuild my life, even if it seemed impossible. The house might still be empty, but I was determined to fill it with something else, something better. The quiet was unbearable. The house that once felt like a home now felt like a cold, hollow shell. I had spent the last few days running from the emptiness, escaping into whiskey-soaked nights and mindless wandering, trying to outrun the aching void that Sarah had left in my life. I couldn't sleep in the bed we had shared for years. It was as if the very sheets held memories of betrayal that I couldn't shake off. Every inch of the house reminded me of her. The smell of her perfume on the pillow, her favorite mug on the kitchen counter, the picture frames lining the walls, capturing moments when we still thought our love was invincible. I had reached the breaking point. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine when my entire world had been turned upside down. I couldn't keep bottling up the questions, the hurt, and the rage. The time had come for a confrontation. This time, face to face, no more distance, no more pretending. I was done. I picked up my phone and, with trembling hands, I dialed Sarah's number again. I had promised myself I wouldn't be the one to chase after her, but here I was, reaching out yet again. It was the final straw. I needed to know the truth, even if it shattered what little was left of my heart. The phone rang, the minutes feeling like an eternity. When she finally answered, her voice was almost annoyingly casual. "What now?" she asked, as if we were discussing the weather, not the wreckage of our marriage. "Sarah, I need to see you," I said, my voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity. "I need answers. I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending like I'm okay when I'm not." There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her weighing her options. Finally, she spoke. "Fine," she said, the indifference in her voice almost making my blood boil. "I'll meet you." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop, neutral ground, though it felt more like a battlefield. I could already feel the storm building inside me, the questions piling up faster than I could process them. Why had she done this? What had I missed? What had I done wrong? When I arrived, Sarah was already there, sitting at a table by the window, her arms crossed, her posture cold. She looked exactly the same as she always had, perfectly put together, calm, detached. She didn't even look upset. In fact, she didn't look like she cared at all. I walked up to the table, trying to control the surge of emotions that were threatening to erupt. My heart was pounding in my chest, my fists clenched, but I had to keep my composure. I had to get the answers I needed. "Sarah," I began, sitting down across from her. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending. What the hell happened? Why? Why did you cheat on me?" Her eyes flickered for a moment, and I saw a brief flash of something. Guilt, perhaps, or maybe just boredom, but it was gone before I could pinpoint it. "You really want to know?" she said, her voice sharp, almost mocking. "You want me to explain why I cheated? Fine, I'll tell you. You were never enough for me, never enough in bed, never enough emotionally. You were too needy, too demanding. You weren't the man I wanted, not anymore." Each word felt like a punch to the gut. I had been expecting something, anything, but not this. Not this cruel, cold confession. It was like she had been waiting to say it, to put all the blame on me, to make me feel like I was the one who had failed. "You think I didn't know?" she continued, her eyes meeting mine with a chilling lack of remorse. "I knew you were getting frustrated with me. I knew you were getting distant. But guess what? I didn't care. I found someone who understood me, who gave me the attention I wanted. I wasn't going to sit around, waiting for you to wake up." I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the anger bubbling over. It was like she was mocking everything I had done for her, everything I had sacrificed. "You're a liar, Sarah," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "You didn't just stop caring about me. You didn't just find someone else. You completely destroyed me. You destroyed us." She looked at me with the same cold detachment, as if my pain meant nothing to her. "I didn't destroy anything," she said dismissively. "You're the one who made me feel invisible. You're the one who pushed me away. This is your fault too, you know?" I could hardly believe what I was hearing. After everything we had been through, after everything I had given her, she was blaming me? I couldn't process it. It didn't make any sense. "You really think this is my fault?" I asked, my voice low, barely controlled. "You think I pushed you into the arms of another man? You think I was the one who pushed you to betray me? Are you even hearing yourself right now?" She didn't flinch. Instead, she shrugged. "You weren't enough. Simple as that." I sat there for a moment in stunned silence. The words she was saying were like daggers, each one cutting deeper than the last. She was justifying everything, everything that had happened between us, everything she had done. It was all somehow my fault, and she didn't even feel bad about it. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, knocking my chair over in the process. I had to get out. I couldn't sit there, hearing her twisted version of the truth. I couldn't let her turn this around on me, like I was the villain in this story. "I'm done, Sarah," I said, my voice thick with disgust. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep fighting for a relationship that's already dead. I don't care what excuses you have. You've already destroyed me, and I'm not going to sit here and let you make me feel guilty for it." I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Sarah sitting there, still so cold, still so unaffected. She didn't even call after me, didn't try to stop me. She just let me go, as if I were nothing. It was over. I knew that now. The confrontation, The questions, the anger. It didn't matter. She had already made her choice, and it was time for me to make mine. The night was cold, but he barely felt it. His body moved forward on autopilot, his breath fogging in the air as he walked aimlessly through the empty streets. Everything felt distant, as though he were watching his own life from the outside, detached from reality. Sarah had walked away, just like that. No regret, no hesitation. She had ended their marriage as easily as one might discard an old photograph, leaving behind nothing but a hollow silence and a man drowning in the wreckage of what used to be love. The truth had hit him like a blade to the chest, sharp, unforgiving. She hadn't just fallen out of love with him. She had replaced him, moved on while he was still living under the illusion that their life together meant something. The weight of it all pressed down on him, suffocating, relentless. His feet carried him forward, through the neon-lit streets, past darkened storefronts and quiet alleyways, until he reached a small, dimly lit bar on the corner of an unfamiliar street. Without thinking, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke hung in the air, a welcome distraction from the storm inside his head. He sat at the bar, barely acknowledging the bartender before murmuring, "Whiskey, double." The glass appeared before him, the amber liquid reflecting the dim glow of the overhead lights. He lifted it to his lips, letting the burns settle in his throat, grounding him for a moment. The warmth did little to thaw the ice in his chest, but at least it dulled the sharp edges of his thoughts. For hours, he sat there, lost in the hum of voices around him, watching strangers come and go as the world continued to move without him. At some point, he noticed a man sitting beside him, watching him with quiet understanding. The man looked older, with weary eyes that had seen their share of heartbreak. "Rough night?" the man finally asked. He didn't answer immediately. He just stared at his glass, watching the way the light bent through the liquid. "Yeah," he finally muttered. The man nodded, as if he already knew. "She left you." A bitter smile ghosted his lips. "Worse," he said, the words thick with exhaustion. "She cheated." The man exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "Been there." They sat in silence for a while, two strangers bound by the shared language of betrayal. It was strange how easily pain recognized itself in others. The man didn't offer empty words of comfort, didn't try to say that time would heal everything. He simply existed in the same space, understanding without needing to speak. Eventually, the man turned to him. "You still love her?" He opened his mouth to answer but hesitated. Did he? Or had he just loved the idea of her? The woman he thought she was, the life he thought they had? "I don't know," he admitted. "Then you don't," the man said simply. "You were just used to her. Used to the way things were. Love isn't a habit, kid. And it sure as hell isn't something that destroys you." The words settled deep, cutting through the haze of alcohol and heartbreak. Had Sarah ever truly made him happy? Or had he spent years clinging to something that had been slipping through his fingers all along? For the first time that night, something inside him shifted. He set his glass down, nodding slightly. "Thanks," he murmured. "Don't mention it," the man said. "Just don't waste your time chasing someone who's already gone." As he stepped out into the cold night, the city felt different. The weight was still,